The small anchor tattoo behind Rachel Martinez's ear seemed harmless enough, just another trendy design that young women got on impulse. Her co-workers at Oceanview Marine Research Institute had seen it countless times during team meetings, never giving it a second thought. But when the research vessel Neptune's Pride began taking on water 30 miles from shore, that tiny symbol would reveal a truth that would change everything they thought they knew about the quiet lab technician who processed their water samples. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Dr. Rachel Martinez had perfected the art of being unremarkable. At 29, she moved through the Oceanview Marine Research Institute with the measured precision of someone who understood that the best scientists were often the ones who let their data speak louder than their personalities. Her shoulder-length black hair was always pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her lab coat hung loose enough to disguise the lean muscle definition that years of intensive training had etched into her frame. The research facility perched on the rocky coastline of Northern California, like a collection of glass and steel modules designed to withstand the harsh Pacific storms. Rachel had worked there for 18 months, analyzing water samples, cataloging marine specimens, and maintaining the sophisticated equipment that kept the Institute's research programs operational. It was steady, meaningful work that suited her perfectly, the kind of environment where attention to detail mattered more than office politics, and where she could contribute to important oceanographic research without drawing unwanted scrutiny. Most of her colleagues barely registered her presence as she moved between the laboratories with her sample trays and data tablets, solving technical problems before they became visible to the senior researchers. Dr. Patricia Chen, the Institute's marine biology director, appreciated Rachel's reliability and thoroughness. But like everyone else, she saw only the surface, a competent lab technician who preferred precision over personality. The morning routine at Oceanview began before dawn, when the research vessels prepared for their daily expeditions into the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. Rachel typically arrived at 5:30 to calibrate the water analysis equipment and prepare sample containers for the various research teams. The work required meticulous attention to contamination protocols and chain of custody procedures, exactly the kind of systematic approach that had always appealed to her methodical nature. On this particular Tuesday in late September, the Institute was preparing for its most ambitious research expedition of the year. The Neptune's Pride, their largest research vessel, would be carrying a team of 12 scientists and technicians 40 miles offshore to study deep water thermal vents that had recently been discovered in previously unexplored sections of the continental shelf. The mission represented the culmination of months of planning and would provide data that could reshape understanding of Pacific Ocean geology. Rachel moved through the pre-departure preparations with her usual efficiency, verifying that sample preservation systems were functioning correctly and ensuring that the mobile laboratory aboard the Neptune's Pride contained all necessary reagents and analysis equipment. The vessel itself was impressive, a 120-foot research platform equipped with advanced sonar systems, deep-sea sampling equipment, and enough laboratory space to conduct sophisticated analysis while still at sea. Dr. Marcus Webb, the expedition's lead oceanographer, reviewed the manifest with characteristic intensity. He was the kind of scientist who approached every project as if the future of marine research depended on its success, which often created an atmosphere of controlled urgency around his expeditions. Webb had been with the Institute for 8 years and had earned recognition for groundbreaking work on ocean acidification patterns, but his management style tended toward micromanagement of details that others might consider routine. "Rachel," Webb called out as she completed her equipment checklist, "I want you to double-check the pH analysis calibrations. The thermal vent samples are going to require precision measurements that can't tolerate any systematic errors. Rachel looked up from her tablet, where she had already logged the successful completion of all calibration procedures. Dr. Webb, I finished the pH calibrations 20 minutes ago. All systems are within specification, and I've documented the baseline readings for cross-reference during analysis. Webb glanced at her tablet display, then nodded with the kind of grudging acknowledgement that suggested he'd expected to find problems that didn't exist. Good. Make sure you maintain those standards throughout the expedition. This data needs to be defensible in peer review. The interaction was typical of their professional relationship. Webb, assuming that others needed constant supervision, while Rachel quietly demonstrated competence that exceeded his expectations. She had grown accustomed to colleagues who made assumptions about her capabilities based on her job title and reserved demeanor, though she occasionally found their lack of awareness more amusing than frustrating. Dr. Jennifer Santos, a Marine chemist who had joined the Institute 6 months earlier, approached the equipment station with a question about sample storage protocols. Santos was enthusiastic and knowledgeable, but still learning the specific procedures that Oceanview had developed for deep water specimen preservation. Rachel, I'm trying to understand the nitrogen purging sequence for the anaerobic samples. The manual says to flush for 90 seconds, but I've seen you do it for 2 minutes, which is correct. Rachel set down her calibration tools and turned to face Santos directly. The manual assumes standard atmospheric conditions, but when you're working 40 miles offshore with temperature variations and equipment that's been in storage, an additional 30 seconds ensures complete oxygen displacement. It's better to overpurge than risk compromising anaerobic cultures. Santos made notes on her tablet, clearly impressed by the practical insight. That makes perfect sense. How did you learn that modification? Rachel paused for a fraction of a second, considering how to explain knowledge that came from experience in environments far more challenging than academic research expeditions. Trial and error over time. You learn to build safety margins into critical procedures. The response satisfied Santos's curiosity without revealing that Rachel's understanding of equipment reliability under adverse conditions had been developed in circumstances where equipment failure could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic loss of life. Some knowledge was easier to share when its origins remained unspecified. As the morning progressed, Rachel found herself working alongside Tom Bradley, the Institute's marine electronics technician, to resolve a communication system glitch that had developed in the Neptune's Pride's emergency beacon array. Bradley was competent and experienced, but the problem required troubleshooting skills that went beyond standard maintenance procedures. I'm getting intermittent signal dropout on the emergency frequencies, Bradley explained, showing Rachel the diagnostic readouts on his testing equipment. The primary beacon tests fine in isolation, but when we integrate it with the navigation systems, we lose coherence. Rachel examined the signal patterns, her mind automatically processing the interference signatures with an expertise that Bradley didn't realize was unusual for a lab technician. The problem is harmonic interference from the sonar array. The emergency beacon frequency is getting corrupted by the active sonar pulses when both systems operate simultaneously. Bradley looked at her with surprise. How did you identify that so quickly? I've been troubleshooting this for 2 hours. Rachel moved to the equipment rack and began adjusting frequency settings with practiced efficiency. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The interference pattern is distinctive. You can isolate it by shifting the beacon to the alternate emergency frequency and recalibrating the sonar pulse timing to avoid overlap. Within 15 minutes, Rachel had resolved the communication problem using techniques that impressed Bradley considerably. As she completed the final system checks, he watched her work with growing curiosity about how a lab technician had acquired such advanced knowledge of marine electronics. Troubleshooting. Rachel, where did you learn to work on communication systems like that? That was some pretty sophisticated frequency analysis. Rachel finished her diagnostic checks and closed the equipment panel. I've always been good with technical problems. Electronics troubleshooting follows logical principles once you understand the underlying systems. The explanation was accurate, but incomplete, avoiding mention of extensive training in military communication systems where equipment reliability often determined mission survival. Bradley accepted her response, though his expression suggested he suspected there was more to her technical background than she was revealing. Dr. Patricia Chen approached the group as they completed their pre-departure preparations, carrying a clipboard thick with research protocols and safety checklists. Chen was a meticulous administrator who took personal responsibility for every aspect of the Institute's operations, from budget management to personnel safety during offshore expeditions. Everyone, I need to review the emergency procedures one more time before we depart. This expedition will take us further from shore than any previous mission, and I want to ensure everyone understands the safety protocols. The assembled team gathered around Chun as she outlined the standard emergency procedures for offshore research operations. Fire suppression systems, emergency communication protocols, life raft deployment, and coordination with Coast Guard rescue services. The briefing was thorough and professional, covering contingencies that were unlikely but potentially critical if circumstances develop beyond normal parameters. Rachel listened to the safety briefing with the kind of attention that came from understanding exactly how quickly situations could deteriorate when operating far from immediate assistance. Her colleagues treated the emergency procedures as necessary formalities, important to acknowledge but unlikely to become relevant during routine research operations. Does anyone have questions about the emergency protocols? Chun asked as she concluded the briefing. Mark Stevens, a graduate research assistant who was participating in his first offshore expedition, raised his hand tentatively. Dr. Chun, what happens if we lose communication with the Coast Guard? How long could we maintain ourselves independently? Chun consulted her clipboard. The Neptune's Pride carries emergency supplies for 72 hours of independent operation. That includes food, water, fuel, and medical supplies. In realistic scenarios, Coast Guard response time would be much faster than that. Rachel found herself mentally reviewing the vessel's emergency equipment inventory with an eye toward scenarios that extended beyond standard contingency planning. 72 hours of supplies assumed optimal conditions and no catastrophic equipment failures. Her training had taught her to plan for situations where everything that could go wrong did go wrong simultaneously. Dr. Webb checked his watch and announced that final boarding would begin in 30 minutes. The research team began transferring their personal equipment and additional scientific instruments to the Neptune's Pride, while Rachel completed her final checks of the mobile laboratory systems. As she worked, Rachel became aware of a conversation taking place near the vessel's stern, where several of her colleagues had gathered during a break in the loading process. The tone was casual and friendly, the kind of discussion that often developed when people worked together in close quarters and began sharing personal observations. "Has anyone else noticed that little tattoo behind Rachel's ear?" asked Jennifer Santos, apparently thinking that Rachel was out of earshot. "It's actually pretty cute, looks like a tiny anchor." Mark Stevens laughed. "I noticed it during that safety meeting. Very nautical. Probably got it to fit in better at a Marine Research Institute." Tom Bradley joined the conversation with obvious amusement. "Those little decorative tattoos are pretty popular with young women right now. Anchors, birds, infinity symbols. Usually doesn't mean anything more than they like the design." Rachel continued her equipment checks, keeping her expression neutral while listening to her colleagues speculate about her personal choices. The conversation was harmless enough, the kind of casual commentary that people made when they thought They understood someone based on surface appearances. It's probably symbolic, suggested Dr. Santos with the confidence of someone offering psychological insight. You know, representing stability or being grounded. Very appropriate for someone who works with ocean research. The group chuckled at the interpretation, clearly enjoying their analysis of what they assumed was a straightforward decorative choice. Rachel had heard similar conversations before, colleagues creating elaborate explanations for things they couldn't possibly understand based on incomplete information. Maybe she got it during college, offered Stevens. A lot of people get tattoos that represent where they want their lives to go, rather than where they've been. Bradley nodded knowingly. That makes sense. An anchor tattoo for someone planning to work in marine science. Pretty thoughtful symbolism, actually. Rachel felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came when people created stories about her choices based on assumptions they'd formed from limited observations. The anchor tattoo behind her ear was indeed symbolic, but not in any way that her colleagues could possibly guess from its appearance or location. Dr. Chun approached the group, apparently having overheard part of their discussion about Rachel's tattoo. I think we should focus on our expedition preparations rather than speculating about personal matters. We have a tight schedule to maintain. The gentle reproach scattered the conversation, though Rachel noticed that several of her colleagues continued to glance in her direction with renewed curiosity. The attention was unwelcome, but not unexpected. She had learned long ago that even the most careful attempts at anonymity occasionally attracted exactly the kind of scrutiny she preferred to avoid. As the team completed their boarding process, Rachel made her way to the mobile laboratory where she would spend most of the expedition, analyzing samples and maintaining research equipment. The lab was well designed and efficiently organized, with enough space for multiple researchers to work simultaneously, without interfering with each other's procedures. Dr. Webb conducted a final manifest review, ensuring that all personnel were accounted for and that emergency equipment had been properly stowed. The Neptune's Pride was scheduled to depart at 9:30, with an estimated arrival time at the research coordinates of 2:15 in the afternoon. Rachel settled into the laboratory routine as the vessel began its journey toward the deep water research site. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly in all directions, deceptively calm under the morning sun. The research expedition represented months of planning and preparation, with the potential to contribute valuable data to the scientific understanding of oceanic thermal systems. As the coastline receded behind them, Rachel found herself unconsciously touching the small anchor tattoo behind her ear. Her colleagues had created a pleasant story about its meaning, a symbol of stability or a decorative choice that reflected her career in marine science. The reality was considerably more complex and infinitely more significant than any of them could possibly imagine. The tattoo was indeed an anchor, but it wasn't decorative, symbolic, or related to marine research in any conventional sense. It was a unit identification mark, as specific and meaningful as a military service ribbon or a professional certification. Rachel had earned the right to wear it through training and operational experience that few people in civilian life could comprehend or appreciate. The anchor behind her ear identified her as a member of Naval Special Warfare Unit 7, an elite reconnaissance and direct action team that had operated in classified environments across 3 continents. The small tattoo represented years of the most demanding military training available, followed by operational deployments where precision and reliability meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Rachel Martinez wasn't just a lab technician who happened to be good with technical problems. She was a former Navy SEAL whose specialized training in underwater operations, emergency response, and crisis management had prepared her for exactly the kinds of scenarios that her colleagues treated as remote theoretical possibilities. The transition from military special operations to civilian marine research had been deliberate and carefully planned. After completing her service commitment with naval special warfare, Rachel had used her GI Bill benefits to earn degrees in marine chemistry and oceanography, focusing her advanced tactical training towards scientific applications that could contribute to civilian research programs. Working at Oceanview Marine Research Institute allowed her to utilize her technical skills and oceanographic knowledge in a meaningful way while maintaining the kind of low profile that former special operations personnel often preferred in civilian careers. The work was intellectually challenging and scientifically important, providing exactly the kind of structured environment where her capabilities could contribute positively without requiring explanation of their origins. Most importantly, the position allowed her to remain invisible in the way that had become comfortable over the past 18 months. Her colleagues saw only what they expected to see: a competent lab technician who was reliable, thorough, and quietly professional. They had no framework for recognizing that her technical competence and calm demeanor under pressure came from training and experience in environments where equipment failure or procedural mistakes could result in mission failure and loss of life. The anchor tattoo behind her ear was a reminder of that training and experience, visible to anyone who knew what to look for, but meaningless to those who lacked the background to understand its significance. Rachel had chosen to keep it visible rather than having it removed because it represented accomplishments and capabilities that remained part of her identity even in civilian life. As the Neptune's pride continued toward the research coordinates, Rachel reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since leaving active military service. The transition from special operations to academic research had required significant adjustments in both lifestyle and perspective, but she had found genuine satisfaction in contributing to scientific knowledge rather than military objectives. The ocean research environment suited her temperament and utilized many of her specialized skills without requiring the constant operational readiness that had defined her military career. She could apply her training in equipment maintenance, emergency procedures, and technical problem-solving to civilian purposes that benefited scientific understanding rather than tactical objectives. Dr. Webb announced over the vessel's intercom that they would reach the research site in approximately 3 hours, with sample collection beginning immediately upon arrival. The thermal vent system they planned to study represented a unique opportunity to gather data about deep ocean geological processes that could contribute to broader understanding of Pacific Ocean dynamics. Rachel began preparing the sample analysis equipment for the intensive work that lay ahead. The thermal vent specimens would require immediate processing to preserve their chemical and biological properties, demanding the kind of systematic efficiency that had always characterized her approach to complex technical tasks. As she worked, Rachel found herself automatically assessing the Neptune's Pride's systems and capabilities with an eye toward potential emergency scenarios. The vessel was well equipped for its intended research mission, but her military training had taught her to evaluate every environment in terms of its limitations and vulnerability to unexpected developments. The communication systems were adequate for routine operations, but might prove insufficient if circumstances required coordination with multiple agencies over extended periods. The emergency equipment was properly maintained and appropriately located, though she noted several modifications that could improve accessibility during crisis situations. Most importantly, Rachel observed that her colleagues approached their work with the kind of confidence that came from operating in environments where serious emergencies were rare and rescue resources were readily available. They were competent scientists and technicians, but none of them had experience managing crisis situations where standard procedures might prove inadequate and improvisation became necessary for survival. Rachel hoped that her specialized emergency management training would never become relevant during her civilian career. The peaceful, methodical world of academic research was exactly what she had sought when transitioning from military service. But her tactical training remained embedded in her thinking, providing automatic awareness of potential risks and response options that her colleagues didn't recognize as significant. As the research vessel continued toward its destination, carrying 12 scientists and technicians who assumed that routine safety procedures would prove adequate for any conceivable emergency, Rachel Martinez remained the only person aboard who understood exactly how quickly offshore situations could deteriorate beyond the scope of standard contingency planning. The small anchor tattoo behind her ear represented training and experience that she hoped would remain irrelevant to her civilian career. But if circumstances developed that required capabilities beyond those of routine emergency response, Rachel was prepared to demonstrate exactly what that tiny symbol actually meant. The Neptune's Pride reached the research coordinates at 2:47 in the afternoon, 15 minutes ahead of Dr. Webb's projected schedule. The thermal vent site was located in waters nearly 400 feet deep, requiring sophisticated sonar mapping and remotely operated vehicle deployment to access the geological formations they planned to study. Rachel assisted with the initial sample collection procedures, operating the mobile laboratory's analysis equipment, while the research team used deep water retrieval systems to gather specimens from the thermal vents. The work was technically demanding and scientifically exciting, representing exactly the kind of cutting-edge oceanographic research that made her civilian career intellectually rewarding. The afternoon proceeded smoothly, with successful sample collection and preliminary analysis confirming that the thermal vent system contained unusual mineral compositions that warranted extensive study. Dr. Webb expressed satisfaction with the data quality, and the research team began discussing plans for additional sample collection that would extend their offshore time by several hours. Rachel processed specimens with her usual efficiency, documenting chemical compositions and preserving samples according to strict contamination control protocols. The work required sustained concentration and systematic attention to detail, exactly the kind of methodical approach that had characterized her military service and continued to define her civilian career. As evening approached, the Pacific Ocean remained deceptively calm, with light winds and minimal wave action that provided ideal conditions for precision research operations. The Neptune's Pride maintained its position above the thermal vent site using dynamic positioning systems, allowing the research team to continue their work without concerns about vessel stability or sample contamination. Dr. Chun announced that the expedition had exceeded its preliminary objectives and that the team could begin preparing for the return journey to Oceanview Marine Research Institute. The successful mission would provide months of analysis work and contribute valuable data to several ongoing research programs focused on Pacific Ocean geological systems. Rachel began securing her laboratory equipment and organizing the collected samples for transport back to shore. The day had been professionally rewarding and scientifically productive, representing exactly the kind of meaningful work that had attracted her to marine research as a civilian career. As she completed her post-collection procedures, Rachel reflected on how comfortable she had become with the routine challenges of academic research. The work utilized many of her technical skills while providing intellectual satisfaction that was different from, but equally rewarding as her military service had been. The small anchor tattoo behind her ear remained her only visible connection to the specialized training that had prepared her for scenarios far more challenging than routine research expeditions. Her colleagues continued to see only what they expected to see: a competent lab technician who contributed reliably to their scientific objectives. Rachel preferred that perception and had no desire to complicate her civilian life by revealing capabilities that weren't relevant to academic research. The peaceful, methodical world of marine science was exactly what she had sought when leaving military service. and she intended to maintain that comfortable anonymity for as long as circumstances permitted. As the Neptune's Pride prepared for its return journey to shore, carrying successful research results and a team of satisfied scientists, Rachel Martinez looked forward to processing the day's samples and contributing to the important oceanographic work that had become her chosen civilian mission. The transition from military special operations to academic research was complete, and she was content with the decision to apply her specialized training to scientific purposes rather than tactical objectives. The small anchor tattoo represented a previous chapter of her life that had prepared her well for civilian challenges, though she hoped those particular capabilities would never become necessary in her new career. But as the research vessel began its journey back toward the California coastline, carrying 12 people who assumed that routine procedures would prove adequate for any conceivable emergency, Rachel remained unconsciously alert to environmental conditions and equipment performance in ways that her colleagues didn't recognize as significant. Some training never fully disappears, even when circumstances seem to make it irrelevant. The question was whether the peaceful world of marine research would continue to provide the kind of structured, predictable challenges that made her specialized emergency management capabilities unnecessary. As the Neptune's Pride moved through the darkening Pacific waters toward what everyone assumed would be a routine return to shore, Rachel Martinez had no way of knowing that her carefully constructed civilian anonymity was about to be tested in ways that would reveal exactly what the small anchor tattoo behind her ear actually represented. The first indication that something was wrong came at 7:32 in the evening, when the Neptune's Pride's primary navigation system began displaying erratic position readings. Rachel noticed the anomaly immediately while conducting her final equipment shutdown procedures in the mobile laboratory. The GPS coordinates were fluctuating by several hundred meters every few seconds, far beyond normal satellite reception variations. Captain Miguel Rodriguez, the vessel's master, initially dismissed the navigation irregularities as temporary satellite interference. The Pacific had been experiencing unusual solar activity that week, which occasionally affected electronic navigation systems. Rodriguez was an experienced mariner with 23 years of offshore operations, and he had encountered similar technical glitches during previous research expeditions. "Dr. Webb, we're seeing some minor navigation drift, but our backup systems are functioning normally," Rodriguez announced over the intercom. "Estimated arrival time remains unchanged at approximately 10:15 tonight." Rachel paused her laboratory work and moved to examine the navigation display more closely. Her military training had included extensive instruction in maritime navigation systems, and the error patterns she observed suggested something more serious than routine satellite interference. The GPS fluctuations were too regular and too significant to be explained by atmospheric conditions or equipment aging. Dr. Webb reviewed the navigation readings with mild concern, but obvious confidence in standard troubleshooting procedures. "Captain, can we switch to the backup navigation system while you diagnose the primary GPS array?" Rodriguez began implementing the system transfer, but within minutes, the backup navigation began displaying similar erratic readings. Both GPS systems were now providing inconsistent position data, making precise navigation increasingly difficult as darkness fell across the Pacific Ocean. Rachel's tactical training immediately recognized the implications of simultaneous navigation system failures. When multiple redundant systems experienced similar problems simultaneously, the cause was typically either catastrophic equipment damage or deliberate interference. Given the calm weather conditions and lack of obvious physical damage, electronic interference became the more likely explanation. "Captain," Rachel said, approaching the bridge with her tablet, displaying the navigation error patterns she had been analyzing. "The GPS fluctuations show characteristics of active jamming rather than equipment malfunction." Rodriguez looked at her with surprise. Rachel, GPS jamming requires sophisticated equipment and technical expertise. We're 40 miles from shore in open ocean. Who would be jamming GPS signals out here? Rachel studied the error patterns more carefully, her mind processing the tactical implications with expertise that her colleagues didn't realize she possessed. The jamming signature suggests military-grade electronic warfare equipment. Someone with advanced capabilities is deliberately interfering with our navigation systems. Dr. Chun joined the conversation, clearly concerned about the developing situation. Why would anyone want to jam our GPS signals? We're conducting legitimate scientific research in international waters. Before Rachel could respond, Tom Bradley's voice crackled over the communication system from the engine room. "Captain, I'm detecting unusual readings from our main engine systems. Fuel pressure is fluctuating, and I'm seeing temperature variations that don't match our current operating parameters." Rodriguez immediately headed toward the engine room, followed by Dr. Webb and Dr. Chun. Rachel remained on the bridge, continuing her analysis of the navigation interference while monitoring the vessel's other electronic systems for additional anomalies. Her tactical training had taught her to look for patterns when multiple systems experienced problems simultaneously. Equipment failures typically occurred independently unless caused by common factors like power disruptions, environmental damage, or deliberate sabotage. The combination of navigation jamming and engine irregularities suggested coordinated interference rather than coincidental malfunctions. Rachel accessed the vessel's communication array and began scanning maritime radio frequencies for unusual transmissions. Her military experience had included training in signals intelligence, and she knew how to identify the electronic signatures of various types of interference and monitoring equipment. Within minutes, she detected several suspicious transmission sources operating on frequencies typically used for maritime surveillance and communication interception. The signals were encrypted and highly directional, suggesting that someone was actively monitoring and potentially disrupting the Neptune's Pride electronic systems. Dr. Santos appeared on the bridge, looking concerned about the developing technical problems. "Rachel, Dr. Webb asked me to check on the communication status. Are we able to maintain contact with the Coast Guard?" Rachel tested the maritime radio systems and discovered that their communication range had been significantly reduced. They could still transmit and receive over short distances, but the powerful interference was preventing effective communication with shore-based facilities or Coast Guard stations. "Jennifer, our communication capability has been degraded by the same interference that's affecting our navigation systems. We can communicate locally, but we can't reach the Coast Guard or Marine Rescue Services from this distance." Santos looked alarmed by the implications. "So we're essentially cut off from emergency assistance until we resolve these technical problems?" Rachel nodded grimly while continuing her electronic surveillance of the surrounding area. The interference pattern suggests deliberate jamming by sophisticated equipment. This isn't accidental or weather-related. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom from the engine room, carrying a tone of serious concern. "All hands, we have a developing situation in the main engine compartment. I need everyone to report to the main deck immediately for safety." Briefing. Rachel secured her analysis equipment and joined her colleagues on the main deck, where Rodriguez was preparing to address the research team. His expression indicated that the engine problems were more serious than initially suspected, and the combination of navigation and propulsion issues was creating a potentially dangerous situation. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have multiple system failures that require immediate attention," Rodriguez announced. "Our main engines are experiencing fuel system irregularities that may require emergency shutdown. Combined with our navigation problems, this puts us in a precarious position 40 miles from shore." Mark Stevens looked confused and frightened. "Captain, what exactly does that mean for our safety?" Rodriguez consulted his clipboard before responding. "If we lose main propulsion while our navigation systems are compromised, we could drift into shipping lanes or toward hazardous coastal areas. The emergency engines can maintain life support and basic systems, but they don't provide enough power for normal navigation." Rachel listened to the briefing while mentally reviewing emergency procedures that went far beyond the standard civilian protocols Rodriguez was describing. Her SEAL training had included extensive instruction in maritime emergency response, including scenarios where multiple critical systems failed simultaneously. Dr. Webb interrupted the captain's briefing with obvious frustration. "This is completely unacceptable. We have a research schedule to maintain, and these technical problems are jeopardizing months of preparation." Rodriguez's expression hardened slightly. "Dr. Webb, our priority right now is ensuring everyone's safety. The research schedule becomes secondary when we're dealing with potential propulsion and navigation system failures." Rachel stepped forward, recognizing that the situation was developing beyond the scope of standard emergency procedures. "Captain, I'd like to assist with the technical diagnosis. I have experience with marine electronics troubleshooting that might be helpful." Rodriguez looked grateful for the offer. "Rachel, any technical expertise you can provide would be appreciated. These problems are more complex than anything we've encountered before." As the group began dividing into teams to address different aspects of the emergency, Rachel moved toward the engine room with Captain Rodriguez and Tom Bradley. Her military training was automatically engaging as she processed the tactical implications of their situation. Simultaneous failures of navigation, communication, and propulsion systems suggested either catastrophic equipment damage or deliberate sabotage. Given the sophisticated nature of the electronic interference she had detected, sabotage seemed increasingly likely. Someone with advanced capabilities was systematically disabling the Neptune's Pride's critical systems. In the engine room, Rachel immediately recognized that the fuel system irregularities were not mechanical failures. The pressure fluctuations and temperature variations that Bradley had detected showed patterns consistent with contamination or deliberate adulteration of the fuel supply. "Tom, when did you last verify the fuel quality?" Rachel asked while examining the engine diagnostic displays. Bradley checked his maintenance logs. "We topped off the fuel tanks yesterday morning before departure. The fuel was tested and certified by our regular supplier." Rachel moved to the fuel monitoring systems and began analyzing the chemical composition readings with expertise that surprised both Rodriguez and Bradley. The fuel contamination patterns suggest deliberate adulteration with compounds designed to create exactly these kinds of engine performance problems. Rodriguez stared at her in amazement. "Rachel, how do you know enough about fuel chemistry to make that kind of assessment?" Rachel paused, realizing that her analytical capabilities were revealing knowledge that went beyond anything a marine research lab technician should possess. "I've always been interested in technical systems. The contamination signatures are distinctive once you know what to look for." Before Rodriguez could ask follow-up questions, the vessel's emergency alarm system activated with a piercing tone that echoed throughout the Neptune's Pride. The alarm indicated a critical system failure that required immediate response, according to maritime safety protocols. Bradley rushed to the emergency status panel and quickly identified the source of the alarm. "Captain, we have a hull breach in the forward storage compartment. Water is entering the vessel faster than our bilge pumps can handle." Rachel's tactical training immediately recognized the implications: navigation jamming, communication interference, fuel contamination, and now a hull breach represented a coordinated attack designed to disable the vessel completely. Someone was systematically destroying their ability to navigate, communicate, or maintain seaworthiness. Rodriguez activated the general alarm and announced over the intercom that all personnel Should report to emergency stations immediately. The combination of multiple critical failures meant that the Neptune's pride was facing a genuine survival situation 40 miles from shore, with limited communication capabilities. Rachel followed Rodriguez and Bradley to the forward storage compartment, where they discovered a significant breach in the hull below the waterline. The damage appeared to be caused by an explosive charge rather than collision or structural failure, confirming her suspicion that they were under deliberate attack. "Captain, this is sabotage," Rachel announced with certainty that surprised both men. The hull breach was caused by an explosive device, probably activated remotely in coordination with the electronic warfare systems that are jamming our communications. Rodriguez stared at the hull damage while processing the implications of Rachel's assessment. Who would want to sabotage a marine research expedition? We're not carrying anything valuable or strategically important. Rachel's mind was racing through tactical scenarios as she evaluated their deteriorating situation. The coordinated attack suggested that someone had extensive knowledge of the Neptune's Pride's systems and capabilities. The timing and precision of the sabotage indicated careful planning and sophisticated execution. "Captain, we need to assume that whoever is responsible has detailed intelligence about our expedition. They know our route, our schedule, and our equipment. This attack was planned specifically to disable us at maximum distance from rescue assistance." Bradley looked terrified by the implications. "So we're deliberately stranded 40 miles from shore with someone actively trying to sink our vessel?" Rachel nodded grimly while mentally reviewing the emergency response procedures that her colleagues couldn't possibly know existed. "The attackers want us disabled, but not necessarily dead immediately. They could have sunk us with a larger explosive charge. Instead, they're creating a crisis situation that will require rescue response." Rodriguez began implementing damage control procedures while Rachel continued her tactical assessment of their situation. The bilge pumps were slowing the water intrusion but not stopping it completely. They had perhaps 4 to 6 hours before. The hull breach would compromise the vessel's seaworthiness beyond recovery. Dr. Chun's voice came over the communication system from the main deck. "Captain, we're detecting approaching vessels on the horizon. Multiple craft moving toward our position at high speed." Rachel's tactical training immediately recognized the significance of approaching vessels during a sabotage incident. "Captain, those vessels are probably not rescue craft. They're more likely connected to whoever sabotaged our systems." Rodriguez looked at her with growing respect for her analytical capabilities. "Rachel, your assessment of this situation has been accurate so far. What do you think we should expect from those approaching vessels?" Rachel moved to examine the radar display, though the electronic interference was limiting their ability to track the approaching craft precisely. "Based on the coordination of the attack so far, I would expect the approaching vessels to either attempt boarding or force us to abandon ship. Either way, they want control of our personnel and possibly our research data." The implications of Rachel's assessment created a moment of stunned silence in the engine room. Rodriguez and Bradley were processing the possibility that their routine research expedition had somehow become the target of what appeared to be a sophisticated maritime attack. "What kind of people have the capability to execute this type of operation?" Rodriguez asked. Rachel's military experience provided several possibilities, none of them reassuring. Foreign intelligence services, maritime criminal organizations, or rogue military units. All three have access to the electronic warfare equipment and explosive devices we've encountered. Bradley's voice carried obvious panic. "So we're under attack by foreign agents or pirates, and we have no way to call for help." Rachel was already moving toward the emergency equipment lockers while her tactical training shifted into full operational mode. "We have some options, but we need to act quickly before those vessels arrive." Rodriguez followed her to the emergency equipment area. "Rachel, what kind of options are you thinking about?" Rachel began inventorying the emergency supplies with efficiency that revealed expertise far beyond anything a lab technician should possess. Emergency flares, life rafts, survival equipment, and basic tools that could be adapted for defensive purposes if circumstances required. "Captain, we can't outrun or outfight whoever is approaching, but we can make it more difficult for them to achieve their objectives. If they want our research data or personnel, we can create conditions that complicate their operation." Rodriguez watched with growing amazement as Rachel systematically organized emergency supplies with obvious tactical planning expertise. "How do you know so much about this kind of situation?" Rachel paused her equipment organization and met Rodriguez's eyes directly. For the first time since joining the Research Institute, she was faced with circumstances where maintaining her civilian cover might cost lives. "Captain, I have background experience that's relevant to our current situation. But right now, we need to focus on survival rather than explanations." Before Rodriguez could ask follow-up questions, Dr. Webb's voice crackled over the communication system with obvious urgency. "Captain, the approaching vessels are now visible and they're definitely not Coast Guard or rescue craft. They appear to be military-style boats moving in tactical formation." Rachel's assessment had been confirmed. The Neptune's Pride was under coordinated attack by sophisticated adversaries with military-grade equipment and capabilities. The research expedition had somehow become the target of what appeared to be a complex maritime operation. Rodriguez activated the general quarters alarm and announced that all personnel should prepare for possible boarding by hostile forces. The announcement created immediate panic among the research team, who had no training or experience for dealing with maritime security threats. Rachel realized that her 18 months of comfortable anonymity at the Marine Research Institute were about to end permanently. The peaceful world of academic research was colliding with the dangerous realities she had hoped to leave behind when transitioning from military service. As the hostile vessels continued their approach toward the disabled research ship, Rachel Martinez faced a choice that would determine not only her own survival, but the survival of 11 colleagues who had no idea that their quiet lab technician was actually a former Navy SEAL whose specialized training was about to become their only hope for surviving the night. The small anchor tattoo behind her ear represented capabilities that she had hoped would remain irrelevant to her civilian career. But as enemy forces closed in on their position, Rachel understood that the time for anonymity had ended, and the key, as enemy forces closed in on their position, time for action had begun. The question was whether she could protect her colleagues and prevent the attackers from achieving their objectives while maintaining enough operational security to avoid completely compromising her civilian identity. Some secrets were worth protecting, but not when innocent lives hung in the balance. As the first hostile vessel came within visual range of the Neptune's Pride, Rachel Martinez began the mental transition from Marine Research Lab technician back to Naval Special Warfare operator. The transformation would save lives, but it would also end forever the quiet civilian career she had worked so hard to build. The anchor tattoo behind her ear was about to reveal its true meaning to everyone aboard the research vessel, whether she wanted that revelation or not. The first hostile vessel reached the Neptune's Pride at 8:47 in the evening, its crew moving with military precision that confirmed Rachel's worst fears about their attackers' capabilities. Armed figures in tactical gear deployed from the approaching craft using fast rope techniques that demonstrated professional military training rather than ordinary criminal operations. Rachel positioned herself near the emergency equipment locker while observing the boarding party's movements through the bridge windows. Their formation, communication protocols, and weapon handling indicated elite military or paramilitary training comparable to special operations forces. These weren't pirates or opportunistic criminals. They were professionals executing a carefully planned operation. Captain Rodriguez attempted to establish radio communication with the boarding party, Following standard maritime protocols for vessel interdiction. Unknown vessels, this is the research vessel Neptune's Pride. We are conducting legitimate, scientific operations in international waters. State your intentions and legal authority. The response came through a handheld loudspeaker from the lead boarding craft, delivered in accented English by someone clearly accustomed to command authority. Research vessel, you will allow immediate boarding for inspection. Do not attempt to resist or communicate with outside authorities. Compliance ensures safety of all personnel. Dr. Webb moved toward the bridge communication station, apparently intending to attempt emergency contact with the Coast Guard, despite the ongoing jamming interference. Rachel intercepted him before he could reach the radio equipment, recognizing that any communication attempts would likely provoke immediate hostile response. Dr. Webb, don't try to use the radio. They're monitoring all our communications, and any attempt to call for help will be interpreted as hostile action. Webb stared at her with confusion and growing frustration. Rachel, how do you know what they're monitoring? And why are you making tactical decisions about our response to the situation? Before Rachel could answer, the boarding party reached the Neptune's Pride's deck and immediately began deploying personnel to secure the vessel. Their movements were swift, coordinated, and executed with the kind of efficiency that indicated extensive rehearsal and preparation. The boarding team leader, a tall man with distinctive facial scars and obvious command presence, approached the research team while his subordinates secured key areas of the vessel. His equipment and bearings suggested extensive combat experience in maritime operations. I am Commander Petrov, he announced with the authority of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. You will cooperate fully with inspection procedures. Anyone attempting resistance or communication will be treated as hostile combatant. Dr. Chun stepped forward with obvious courage despite the intimidating circumstances. Commander, we are civilian scientists conducting legitimate research. We have no military equipment or strategic materials aboard this vessel. Petrov studied her response while his team continued securing the Neptune's Pride's critical systems. Dr. Chun, your research activities have intersected with matters of national security interest. Cooperation ensures minimal disruption to your personnel safety. Rachel realized that the attackers had detailed intelligence about the research team's identities and mission parameters. This wasn't a random maritime attack, it was a targeted operation, designed to capture specific personnel or research data from the thermal vent expedition. Commander, she said, moving slightly forward to draw his attention away from her colleagues, what specific materials or information are you seeking? Perhaps we can resolve this situation without unnecessary complications. Petrov's eyes focused on Rachel with immediate intensity, as if recognizing something in her bearing or manner of speaking that distinguished her from the other civilians. You speak with interesting confidence for a marine research technician. Perhaps you have experience with security situations. The observation was clearly a test, designed to elicit information about Rachel's background and capabilities. Her response would determine whether the attackers recognized her as a potential threat or continued treating her as an ordinary civilian. I'm trying to help resolve this situation peacefully, Rachel replied carefully, maintaining civilian demeanor while avoiding any behavior that might reveal her military training. Petrov continued studying her with professional assessment that made Rachel increasingly uncomfortable. Something in his expression suggested that he suspected more about her background than he was revealing, though she couldn't determine how much intelligence the attackers possessed about individual team members. All personnel will be secured for processing, Petrov announced to his team. Conduct thorough search of vessel systems and research materials. Priority focus on thermal vent data and related analysis equipment. Rachel's tactical training immediately recognized the implications of their specific interest in the thermal vent research. The expedition had discovered mineral compositions that could have strategic or military applications, making the research data valuable enough to justify a complex maritime operation. As Petrov's team began separating the research personnel for individual processing, Rachel noticed that Tom Bradley was being subjected to particularly intensive questioning about the vessel's communication and navigation systems. The attackers were gathering detailed technical intelligence about Oceanview Marine Research Institute's capabilities and procedures. Mark Stevens appeared to be on the verge of panic as armed personnel searched his equipment and personal belongings. His obvious fear was creating exactly the kind of unstable situation that could escalate into violence if not carefully managed. Rachel moved closer to Stevens, hoping to provide reassurance, while avoiding actions that might be interpreted as resistance or leadership behavior by the attackers. "Mark, stay calm and follow their instructions. This will be resolved more quickly if everyone cooperates." Petrov immediately noticed Rachel's intervention and approached her with renewed interest. "You show natural leadership tendencies for research technician. Perhaps your background includes training in crisis management or emergency response." The comment was clearly another probe, designed to elicit information about Rachel's qualifications and experience. Her response would be carefully analyzed for indicators of military or law enforcement training that might make her a security threat. "I've always been good in stressful situations," Rachel replied, maintaining eye contact while avoiding any body language that might reveal tactical awareness. Before Petrov could ask follow-up questions, one of his subordinates approached with urgent intelligence from their vessel search activities. The team member spoke rapidly in what Rachel recognized as Russian, though she carefully avoided any indication that she understood the conversation. From the discussion, Rachel gathered that the attackers had discovered something unexpected during their search of the research data and equipment. Their intelligence had apparently been incomplete regarding the expedition's actual discoveries and their potential strategic significance. Petrov's expression changed as he received the intelligence update, becoming more serious and focused. Whatever his team had discovered was apparently more valuable or significant than they had anticipated, potentially changing their operational objectives. "Dr. Webb," Petrov said, turning toward the expedition leader with new urgency, "your thermal vent research has identified mineral deposits with applications beyond standard scientific interest. You will provide complete data files and analysis results immediately." Webb looked confused by the request. "Commander, our research is purely academic. We're studying geological processes, not strategic materials or military applications." Petrov's patience appeared to be diminishing as he processed the disconnect between his intelligence briefing and the research team's apparent ignorance of their discovery's significance. "Your analysis equipment has identified rare earth elements and strategic minerals that have defense industry applications. You will cooperate fully with data transfer procedures." Rachel's tactical training allowed her to understand the situation more clearly than her colleagues could. The thermal vent research had apparently stumbled across mineral deposits that had military or strategic value, making the entire expedition a target for foreign intelligence operations. As Petrov's team began transferring research data and equipment to their vessels, Rachel realized that the attackers' ultimate intentions remained unclear. They could be planning to extract valuable personnel along with the research materials, or they might intend to eliminate witnesses to their operation. Dr. Santos approached Rachel quietly while the attackers were focused on data extraction activities. "What do you think they're going to do with us once they get what they want?" Rachel considered the tactical implications while maintaining awareness of the armed personnel throughout the vessel. Their behavior suggests they're professionals rather than criminals. That could mean better discipline, but it also means they'll make strategic decisions about our disposal based on operational security rather than emotional factors. Santos looked increasingly frightened by Rachel's assessment. "Disposal? You're talking about whether they're going to kill us." Rachel met her eyes directly, recognizing that her colleagues deserved honest assessment of their situation. "Jennifer, these people have committed acts of war against a civilian research vessel in international waters. They can't allow witnesses who might compromise their operation or identify their sponsoring organization." The brutal reality of their circumstances was beginning to penetrate the research team's initial shock and confusion. They were facing professional operators who would make life-and-death decisions based on strategic calculations rather than humanitarian considerations. As if responding to Rachel's assessment, Petrov announced that all personnel would be transferred to the attacking vessels for transport to secure processing facility. The euphemistic language couldn't disguise the fact that the research team was being kidnapped by foreign operatives. "Commander," Dr. Chun said with remarkable courage, "our disappearance will trigger immediate search and rescue operations by the U.S. Coast Guard. Taking American citizens hostage will create international incidents that complicate whatever objectives you're trying to achieve." Petrov smiled grimly at her challenge. "Dr. Chun, your vessel will suffer unfortunate accident during return journey. Mechanical failures, explosion, tragic loss of research team during offshore expedition. No evidence of foreign involvement. Will survive investigation." The casual announcement of their planned murder created immediate panic among several research team members. Mark Stevens began hyperventilating, while Tom Bradley looked physically ill at the implications of Petrov's statement. Rachel realized that the moment for maintaining civilian cover had passed. Her colleagues were about to be executed to protect the attacker's operational security, and she was the only person aboard with training and experience to prevent their deaths. As Petrov began issuing orders for personnel transfer to the attacking vessels, Rachel made the decision that would end her civilian anonymity permanently. She moved toward the emergency equipment locker with practiced efficiency, her bearing subtly shifting from civilian researcher to military operator. "Commander Petrov," she said, her voice carrying new authority that immediately commanded attention throughout the vessel. "I need to discuss alternative arrangements for your operational security requirements." Petrov turned toward her with instant recognition that something fundamental had changed in Rachel's demeanor. Her posture, voice tone, and manner of address indicated training and experience that contradicted her civilian research position. "Miss Martinez, you speak now with different confidence. Perhaps you wish to share relevant background information." Rachel straightened to full military bearing, abandoning any pretense of civilian identity. "Lieutenant Commander Rachel Martinez, United States Navy, Naval Special Warfare Command. I'm proposing alternative solutions to your operational security concerns." The announcement created stunned silence throughout the Neptune's pride, broken only by the sound of Petrov's team immediately shifting to higher alert status. Rachel's colleagues stared at her in complete amazement, processing the revelation that their quiet lab technician was actually a Navy SEAL. Petrov's expression showed professional respect combined with immediate reassessment of the tactical situation. "Commander Martinez, your presence aboard civilian research vessel creates interesting complications for planned operation." Rachel moved closer to Petrov while maintaining awareness of his armed subordinates throughout the vessel. "Commander, eliminating American military personnel creates significantly different international complications than disposing of civilian researchers. Perhaps we can discuss alternatives that achieve your objectives without escalating this incident beyond manageable parameters." The negotiation was carefully structured using language that both commanders understood from professional military experience. Rachel was offering to trade her life for her colleagues' safety while providing Petrov with operational alternatives that might serve his strategic objectives. "What alternatives do you propose?" Petrov asked, clearly intrigued by the possibility of achieving his mission without committing acts that would trigger major international response. Rachel glanced around at her colleagues, who were still processing the shock of discovering that their lab technician was actually an elite military operator. You need the research data and assurance that your operation remains compartmentalized. I can provide operational security guarantees that eliminate the need for permanent disposal of civilian personnel. Petrov considered her proposal while consulting briefly with his subordinates in Russian. Rachel understood enough of their discussion to recognize that her military status had created unexpected complications for their planned operation. Tom Bradley found his voice despite the overwhelming circumstances. "Rachel, you're actually Navy Special Operations? All this time, we thought you were just really good with technical problems." Rachel kept her attention focused on Petrov while responding to Bradley's question. "Tom, the technical skills were real. The background was more complicated than the job required." Dr. Webb stepped forward with obvious amazement and growing respect. "Commander Martinez, are you saying that you've been protecting us this entire time without our knowledge?" Rachel finally turned to address her colleagues directly, knowing that her cover identity was permanently destroyed, but hoping that her revelation might save their lives. "Dr. Webb, I joined the Research Institute because I wanted to contribute to civilian science rather than military operations. But my training remains relevant when circumstances require it." The small anchor tattoo behind her ear was now fully visible as Rachel had unconsciously shifted to military bearing that emphasized rather than concealed her service identity. What had appeared to be a decorative design now clearly represented professional military achievement and specialized training. Dr. Santos pointed at the tattoo with sudden understanding. "The anchor behind your ear, it's not decorative at all, is it?" Rachel touched the small symbol briefly while maintaining visual contact with Petrov and his armed team. The tattoo identifies Naval Special Warfare Unit 7. It represents training and operational experience in exactly these kinds of situations. Mark Stevens looked at Rachel with completely new eyes, seeing for the first time the military professional who had been hidden beneath the civilian researcher identity. "Commander, can you actually get us out of this situation?" Rachel's response was directed as much toward Petrov as toward her colleagues. "Mark, I can negotiate arrangements that serve everyone's interests while avoiding outcomes that escalate this incident into international crisis." Petrov had been listening to the exchange with obvious professional interest. "Commander Martinez, your proposal assumes that American military officer can provide operational security guarantees acceptable to foreign intelligence operations. Explain specific terms you are suggesting." Rachel moved closer to the center of the group, positioning herself where she could address both Petrov and her colleagues simultaneously. "Commander Petrov, military personnel understand operational compartmentalization requirements. I can ensure that your intelligence objectives remain protected while avoiding actions that trigger major search and rescue operations." The negotiation was entering critical territory where Rachel's military training and diplomatic skills would determine whether her colleagues survived the next few hours. She was offering herself as a hostage while providing Petrov with alternatives to mass execution. "What specific guarantees can you provide?" Petrov asked with professional curiosity about how an American special operations officer might resolve the tactical dilemma he faced. Rachel straightened to full command presence, drawing on years of training in high-stakes negotiations and crisis resolution. "Commander, I can provide personal guarantee that the thermal vent research data remains compartmentalized within appropriate national security channels. No civilian publicity, no academic publication, no compromise of your operational intelligence." The proposal offered Petrov everything his mission required while eliminating the need for actions that would trigger massive international incident. Rachel was offering to sacrifice her civilian career and potentially her freedom to save her colleagues' lives. Petrov consulted again with his subordinates before responding to Rachel's offer. Their discussion suggested that her military status had indeed created complications for their planned operation, but also opportunities for resolution that hadn't existed when dealing with pure civilians. Commander Martinez, your proposal has interesting merit. However, implementation requires verification of your authority to provide guarantees you are offering. Rachel reached slowly into her equipment bag and withdrew a sealed military identification packet that she had hoped never to use during her civilian career. The packet contained credentials that verify her naval special warfare background and current reserve status. Commander, these credentials confirm my authority to negotiate national security arrangements on behalf of United States military interests. Petrov examined the identification documents with professional thoroughness before returning them to Rachel. His expression indicated respect for her military qualifications combined with calculation about how her status affected his operational alternatives. Commander Martinez, your proposal creates acceptable framework for mission completion. However, you understand that your personal freedom becomes forfeit under these arrangements. Rachel nodded with full understanding of the implications. Commander, I accept those terms in exchange for safe release of civilian research personnel. Dr. Chun stepped forward with obvious courage and determination. Commander Martinez, we can't allow you to sacrifice yourself for our safety. You're part of our team, and we should face this situation together. Rachel turned toward her colleagues with the kind of expression that conveyed both military authority and personal affection. Dr. Chen, this is exactly what my training prepared me for. Protecting civilian personnel is the mission, and I'm qualified to execute it successfully. As Petrov began issuing orders to his team for implementing the new operational plan, Rachel realized that her 18 months of peaceful anonymity at Oceanview Marine Research Institute were ending in exactly the kind of high-stakes military situation she had hoped to leave behind. The anchor tattoo behind her ear was now fully revealed as the combat insignia it had always been, representing training and capabilities that had saved her colleagues' lives while destroying forever the civilian identity she had worked so hard to construct. But as she watched her teammates preparing for safe transfer back to shore under the negotiated agreement, Rachel Martinez understood that some sacrifices were worth making, even when they meant abandoning the peaceful life she had wanted to build. Her transition from hidden military operative to revealed protector was complete, and regardless of what happened next, she had successfully used her specialized training to serve others in the way that mattered most. 3 months later, Rachel stood in the pristine conference room at Naval Special Warfare Command Headquarters in Coronado, watching the Pacific Ocean stretch endlessly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. The debriefing sessions were finally complete, and her temporary assignment as liaison between civilian marine research and military intelligence operations was drawing to a close. Admiral Sarah Mitchell, the commanding officer who had overseen Rachel's transition back to active duty status, approached with a folder containing her next assignment options. Mitchell was a distinguished naval officer whose own career had bridged the gap between special operations and strategic intelligence work. Commander Martinez, the intelligence value of your civilian research position has exceeded all expectations, Mitchell said, settling into the chair across from Rachel. The thermal vent mineral discoveries have strategic implications that we're still evaluating, and your relationship with the Oceanview team has provided crucial insight into foreign intelligence targeting of American research operations. Rachel accepted the folder while reflecting on how dramatically her life had changed since that evening aboard the Neptune's Pride. The negotiated prisoner exchange with Commander Petrov had led to her temporary detention by Russian intelligence services, followed by complex diplomatic arrangements that eventually secured her release in exchange for valuable intelligence about maritime security vulnerabilities. Admiral, the Research Institute personnel have been remarkably understanding about my deception regarding my background. They've agreed to continue their work under enhanced security protocols. Mitchell smiled with obvious approval. Dr. Chun and her team have been briefed on the strategic significance of their discoveries. They understand that their thermal VENT research requires classification at levels that will limit academic publication, but provide crucial support for national security applications. Rachel examined the assignment options in the folder, noting opportunities that ranged from continued liaison work with civilian research institutions to deployment with active special operations units conducting maritime missions worldwide. Each option represented a different approach to utilizing her unique combination of scientific knowledge and military expertise. Admiral, I noticed that one of these assignments involves establishing a new program for integrating civilian scientists with military intelligence operations. Mitchell leaned forward with obvious interest. Commander, your experience at Oceanview has demonstrated the value of placing qualified military personnel in civilian research positions. The program would formalize those arrangements while providing better operational security and intelligence coordination. Rachel considered the implications of leading a program that would essentially institutionalize the kind of deep cover civilian work she had stumbled into accidentally. The concept had merit from both intelligence and national security perspectives, but it would also require recruiting other special operations personnel willing to sacrifice their military identities for extended civilian assignments. The program would involve training military personnel to function effectively in civilian academic environments while maintaining capabilities for intelligence collection and emergency response. Mitchell nodded approvingly. Exactly. We need operators who can contribute meaningfully to civilian research while remaining prepared for situations like the one you encountered aboard the Neptune's Pride. Your success has proven the concept's viability. Rachel's phone buzzed with an incoming message from Dr. Chun at Oceanview Marine Research Institute. The text was brief but significant, indicating that the institute had received approval for a major new research grant that would expand their thermal vent studies under military supervision. Admiral, it appears that the Oceanview team is continuing their research under the new security arrangements. Mitchell checked her tablet for the latest intelligence updates. Commander, their work has identified mineral deposits that could revolutionize certain defense applications. The classification level ensures that foreign intelligence services won't target similar operations, while allowing the research to continue productively. Rachel reflected on her colleagues' reactions when they learned the full extent of her military background and the strategic significance of their discoveries. The initial shock had given way to understanding and even pride that their work contributed to national security in ways they had never imagined. Dr. Webb had been particularly supportive, acknowledging that Rachel's technical competence and crisis management skills had always suggested capabilities beyond those of a typical lab technician. Tom Bradley had expressed amazement that the woman who had helped him troubleshoot communication systems was actually trained in military electronics and tactical operations. Most importantly, the research team had maintained their professional relationships with Rachel, despite learning that their quiet colleague had been living under an assumed identity for 18 months. Their acceptance had made her transition back to military status significantly easier than she had anticipated. Admiral, I'm interested in the program development assignment. The opportunity to train other operators for civilian integration while maintaining operational readiness appeals to me. Mitchell smiled with obvious satisfaction. Commander, I was hoping you'd choose that option. Your experience provides the perfect foundation for developing training protocols and operational procedures that other personnel can follow successfully. Rachel stood and moved to the window overlooking the Pacific, where naval training operations were visible in the distance. Young sailors in special operations, candidates were learning the skills and disciplines that had defined her own military career and made her successful in her civilian assignment. Admiral, I'd like to maintain some connection to the Oceanview Institute, both for operational continuity and because I genuinely value the scientific work they're conducting. Mitchell consulted her tablet for scheduling information. That can certainly be arranged. Dr. Chun has specifically requested that you continue serving as their military liaison, and the arrangement provides excellent cover for your new program. Development responsibilities. Rachel's phone rang with a call from Captain Rodriguez, who had commanded the Neptune's Pride during the incident that revealed her true identity. Rodriguez had become something of a celebrity within maritime circles for his handling of the crisis situation and his cooperation with the subsequent intelligence operations. Commander Martinez, I wanted to let you know that we've received approval for the new research vessel that will replace the Neptune's Pride. The enhanced security systems and communication equipment you recommended have been incorporated into the design. Rachel stepped away from Admiral Mitchell to take the call privately. Captain, I'm glad to hear that the new vessel will provide better protection for future expeditions. How is the crew adapting to the enhanced security protocols? Rodriguez's voice carried obvious pride in his team's professionalism. Everyone has embraced the new procedures. Tom Bradley has become something of an expert in counter-surveillance techniques, and Dr. Santos has been training other researchers in basic security awareness. Your influence has transformed our entire approach to offshore operations. After ending the call, Rachel returned to Admiral Mitchell with a clearer sense of how she wanted to structure her new assignment. The opportunity to bridge military and civilian operations while developing training programs for other personnel offered exactly the kind of meaningful work that had attracted her to both special operations and marine research. Admiral, I'd like to establish the program headquarters at a facility that allows close coordination with both military training commands and civilian research institutions. The integration needs to be seamless for both communities. Mitchell opened her laptop and began reviewing facility options that could support the new program's requirements. Commander, there are several locations that offer proximity to both naval installations and major research universities. The key is finding a base that provides necessary security while maintaining academic credibility. Rachel considered the unique challenges of training military personnel to function effectively in civilian environments where their capabilities needed to remain hidden until circumstances required their revelation. The program would essentially be preparing operators to live double lives successfully. The training will need to include extensive instruction in civilian, professional skills as well as maintaining operational security over extended periods. Operators will need to contribute meaningfully to their assigned research while remaining prepared for crisis situations. Mitchell nodded with understanding of the program's complexity. Commander, your experience demonstrates that the concept works when properly executed. The challenge is developing systematic training that produces consistent results across different personnel and assignments. Rachel's tablet chimed with an email from Mark Stevens, the graduate research assistant who had been most frightened during the Neptune's Pride incident. His message included photographs from a recent conference presentation about maritime security awareness, showing how the experience had influenced his academic focus. The transformation in her former colleagues continued to surprise Rachel. People who had begun the expedition as purely academic researchers had become advocates for enhanced security in civilian scientific operations. Their experience had created a new appreciation for the intersection between academic research and national security concerns. Admiral, I think the program should include components that educate civilian researchers about potential security implications of their work, the Oceanview team's naivety about their discoveries. Strategic significance was typical of academic approaches that don't consider military applications. Mitchell agreed enthusiastically. That's an excellent addition to the program concept. We need better communication between military intelligence and civilian research communities to prevent foreign targeting of strategically valuable discoveries. Rachel moved back to the conference table and began sketching preliminary organizational charts for the new program. The structure would need to accommodate training for military personnel transitioning to civilian assignments, while providing security education for researchers whose work might have strategic implications. The program could serve dual purposes, placing qualified operators in civilian positions while educating civilian researchers about security requirements for strategically sensitive work. Mitchell reviewed Rachel's initial concepts with obvious approval. Commander, this program could fundamentally improve how we protect American scientific research from foreign intelligence operations. Your experience provides the perfect foundation for systematic implementation. As their planning session continued, Rachel reflected on how her accidental discovery by colleagues, who joked about her cute anchor tattoo, had led to opportunities she could never have anticipated. The small symbol behind her ear had indeed represented everything it was supposed to represent, but revealing its true meaning had opened doors rather than closing them. 6 months later, Rachel received a package at her new program headquarters office with a return address from Oceanview Marine Research Institute. Inside was a framed photograph of the research team aboard the new vessel that had replaced the Neptune's Pride, along with a handwritten note from Dr. Chun. Commander Martinez, our latest thermal vent expedition was completely successful, thanks to the security procedures you helped develop. The crew wanted you to know that we now understand the true significance of expertise that doesn't reveal itself until circumstances require it. Your anchor represents capabilities that saved our lives and transformed our understanding of the intersection between science and service. With gratitude and respect, Dr. Patricia Chun and the Oceanview Research Team. Rachel smiled as she placed the photograph on her desk next to the commendations from her new program's first graduating class. The anchor tattoo behind her ear was no longer a secret to be maintained, but it remained a symbol of service that continued to evolve with her career. The quiet lab technician who had processed water samples in anonymous efficiency was gone forever, replaced by a military officer whose unique experience bridged worlds that rarely understood each other. Her story had become an example of how hidden capabilities could serve others most effectively when revealed at exactly the right moment. The small anchor behind her ear would always represent training and experience that shaped her approach to both military service and civilian contribution. But now it also represented the courage to abandon comfortable anonymity when others needed protection, and the wisdom to use specialized capabilities in service of purposes larger than personal preference. Some tattoos were meant to be secrets. Others were meant to be revealed when their true meaning could save lives and inspire others to recognize that the most valuable people were often those whose capabilities remained invisible until circumstances demanded their revelation. Rachel Martinez had learned that being useful was more important than being anonymous, and that the greatest service came from applying her specialized training to protect others, regardless of whether maintaining her cover was convenient or comfortable. The anchor tattoo represented a commitment that transcended individual assignments or personal preferences. It was a symbol of service that found its truest meaning when used to benefit others, whether in the hidden efficiency of civilian research or the revealed courage of military protection. And in the end, that was exactly what service was supposed to represent. 2 years after the Neptune's Pride incident, Rachel Martinez stood before a packed auditorium at the Naval War College, delivering the keynote address to graduating intelligence officers. The small anchor tattoo behind her ear was clearly visible as she spoke, no longer hidden beneath carefully arranged hair, but displayed with quiet pride. Excellence often wears ordinary clothes, she told the assembled officers. The greatest assets in any operation are frequently the ones you'd never suspect of extraordinary capability. In the front row sat Colonel James Harrison, a decorated SEAL commander whose own career had been transformed by studying Rachel's integration program. Beside him was Dr. Patricia Chen, now serving as Director of Strategic Research Coordination, bridging military intelligence with civilian scientific discovery. The program Rachel had developed was now active across 17 research institutions worldwide, with 43 former Special Operations personnel successfully embedded in civilian roles. Each carried their own version of hidden identification, waiting for moments when their true capabilities might serve the greater good. Assumptions kill, Rachel continued, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had lived the principle she taught. The enemy assumes the lab technician poses no threat. Colleagues assume the quiet team member lacks leadership potential. We assume we understand people based on surface observations. Tom Bradley, now the Chief Security Officer at Oceanview's new facility, had traveled from California specifically to hear Rachel speak. The man who once dismissed her technical expertise as lucky, intuition now trained other civilian contractors to recognize and respect hidden military backgrounds among their personnel. Dr. Jennifer Santos sat near the back of the auditorium, taking notes for the security awareness paper she was writing based on her experience aboard the research vessel. Her academic focus had shifted entirely toward understanding the intersection of civilian research and national security, inspired by witnessing Rachel's transformation firsthand. The most dangerous operators are those who master the art of invisibility, Rachel explained to her rapt audience. They contribute meaningfully to their assigned roles while maintaining readiness for situations that require their specialized training. Mark Stevens watched from the livestream at his new position with the Department of Defense Research Coordination Office. The graduate student who had panicked during the maritime crisis now helped identify civilian research projects with potential military applications, ensuring they received appropriate protection and oversight. Captain Rodriguez had been promoted to admiral and now oversaw the Pacific Fleet's research vessel security protocols. The procedures he implemented, based on Rachel's recommendations, had prevented 3 additional foreign intelligence operations targeting American scientific expeditions. "Your service doesn't end when you leave active duty," Rachel told the graduating officers. "It evolves into forms that may prove even more valuable to national security." The quiet contribution of hidden capabilities often achieves more than the visible deployment of obvious force. In the audience, Commander David Park unconsciously touched the small Triton tattoo behind his left ear, scheduled to begin his civilian assignment at a biotechnology research facility the following month. He was one of 12 officers from this graduating class who would disappear into civilian roles, their military identities replaced by carefully constructed professional backgrounds. Lieutenant Sarah Kim checked her tablet, reviewing the final details of her transition to a position at a renewable energy research consortium. Her naval intelligence training would be hidden beneath the credentials of an environmental scientist, waiting for situations where her true capabilities might prove crucial. "The anchor represents more than naval service," Rachel concluded, pointing to the small tattoo that had started this entire journey. "It represents stability in chaos, reliability under pressure, and the courage to reveal your true self when others need your protection." The standing ovation that followed wasn't just for her presentation, but for the principle she embodied. In an auditorium filled with professional warriors, Rachel Martinez had proven that the greatest strength often lay in the willingness to appear weak until circumstances demanded otherwise. As the ceremony concluded, Rachel received a message on her secure phone from an encrypted source. Another civilian research team had encountered suspicious activity during an expedition, and preliminary intelligence suggested foreign involvement. The message was brief but familiar in its implications. Rachel smiled slightly as she read the coordinates and mission parameters. Her program was working exactly as designed, with qualified personnel already in position to address the situation before it escalated beyond manageable parameters. The quiet lab technician was gone forever, but the principle she represented lived on in dozens of others who understood that true service often required the courage to remain invisible until the moment came to stand and be counted. The small anchor behind her ear caught the auditorium lights one final time as Rachel Martinez walked toward her next assignment, carrying with her the knowledge that the most important battles were often won by people whose capabilities remained hidden until the precise moment when revealing them could save lives. Some secrets were meant to protect the people who kept them. Others were meant to protect everyone else. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.